Right, good morning. How you all doing? Hope you're well. Karibuni sana. Hope you had a great weekend. But we're really glad that you could join us this beautiful 14th day of April 2025. From whatever it is that you're joining us from, I'm really happy that you did make the time to be here with us. So for the sake of guys who are new here, John is my name. I'm a trader with Afriforex. Afriforex is a trading unit, so we also do have the rest of the team here. So in case you do have any questions, feel free to ask them, both, of course. I mean, on the chat box, the team will be getting back to you, but I will also be looking at the questions, the queries, comments, generally all the feedback that's going to be in the chat box, but towards the very tail end. But you don't really need to wait until then. You still can keep that chit chat going on even as we continue progressing on. And of course, for the guys who are going to be joining us much later on when you're not live, also feel free to leave a comment. And also for everyone, also feel free to like and subscribe. That does also end up helping out our channel a lot. So we're going to jump straight into it. So we'll start off by looking at the watch list. Of course, compare what we have today in comparison to what we had on Friday. So this was the watch list on Friday. Moving into today, two changes. So the Australian dollar and silver have moved to the buy side of things. So we're generally going to be mixing and matching up the USDs, the Canadian dollar, and the Great British Pound versus all the rest of the currency pairs that are on the buy side. And then we'll finish off with the indices and the commodities. But we can start off by looking at the AUDs that we had on Friday that unfortunately have not made it to our watch list this morning and see what we can learn from what transpired on Friday. So we did have the Australian dollar against the Swiss franc. For this one, we're trying to see whether we could have gotten some selling opportunities. So you can see the three areas I had pointed out. So Friday morning price was here, pointed out you possibly could have looked for sales. You can see that during the London session, price was somewhere within this region here. Price came down. There was this area right here that I pointed out that you could potentially run into issues with the opposite party. And you can see that the market did actually probe within this region here. Unfortunately, price just couldn't get all the way down till within this area here. And you can see that there were quite a number of attempts by the sellers, to break beneath this region to the downside. So definitely was an area that needed to be watched out for. And you can see that off this area, the market did actually bounce off that region to the upside. So a couple of selling opportunities on that one, but definitely did need to manage the trade or your trades within that blue SNR. So the next one, the Australian dollar against the Japanese yen. So for this one, on Friday, we're trying to see whether we could have gotten some selling opportunities. You can see the three regions that I had pointed out, also some illustrations of what to expect. So Friday morning, price was here. We're expecting price to break to the downside. And you can see that this region gave issues and the sellers just couldn't break and hold beneath this region to the downside. And the market did end up coming back up. There was also this area I had pointed out. Maybe you could have gotten some sells. There was some sort of a minor reaction of that region to come to the downside, but generally you can see that the market did continue to make higher highs and higher lows. So also a bit of a tricky situation in terms of looking for selling opportunities or getting sales rather on the Australian dollar against the Japanese yen on Friday. So the next one, this is the euro against the Australian dollar. So for this one on Friday, trying to see whether we could have gotten some buying opportunities. So you can see the three areas that I had pointed out, also some illustrations of what potentially to expect. So the market was here, broke to the upside, came back in. Unfortunately, we just couldn't hold. Consider the market broke within there, came back to the downside and literally held to the downside of this area. And that meant that being the probe, the market holding to the downside within there, you can see that the sellers did actually push to the downside during the US session. So unfortunately, also on the euro against the Australian dollar, there wasn't much in terms of buying opportunity on that one. So moving on to the next one, which is the Australian dollar against the New Zealand dollar. So for this one, on Friday, we're trying to see whether we could have gotten some sales. You can see the three regions that I had pointed out. So Friday morning price was here. We're expecting the market to push to the downside. Seems like the market did start to make a move. This was during the London market open. So it broke to the downside, came back in, potentially needed to be read on a smaller time frame to potentially end up getting that selling opportunity to come down. The market came down. Unfortunately, on the pullback, we just couldn't get the sellers to make another push to the downside. So I guess definitely maybe a region with some buyers within this area here, because you can't see that the market pushed to the upside. It's come back in within here. Maybe you could find either the market could range, or maybe the buyers could potentially end up reacting off that region to the upside. But generally, since the AUDs are showing some sort of strength, and we don't really want to end up mixing and matching that up with the New Zealand dollar because it's also pretty strong, we could find the market moving sideways. So that's the reason why we will be walking away from this one for today. So that's pretty much it in terms of the currency pairs that we had on Friday that unfortunately did not make it to our watch list. So I guess we can move on to what we could expect on the charts today. Of course, today being a Monday, fortunately, we don't really get to look at the screenshots, but we're grateful for the guys who did send them in on Friday. Remember, if you do get any trades based on the things that we do discuss here, feel free to send them in to us. Our contact details are in the video description. And also, if you're struggling with your trading and you want more information, also feel free to reach out to us with the same contact details, and we'll see how best we can end up helping you. So we're going to start off with the USD pairs, and we're going to mix and match them up with everything on the buy side. And even before we do that, let's just have a quick look at the economic calendar to see what we could expect today potentially. So there's already been some 2 news events already that have already happened. So that's already factored into at least the watch list for today. So we'll have some CHF coming out in a bit, and you can see that during the US session, there's going to be some USD news events, just one, and the Canadian, one Canadian news event as well. So we'll wait and see what ends up happening. It doesn't seem like it's high impact news, but potentially we should get some good moves on the charts later on. So we're going to start off with the USD pairs. So we'll start off with the US dollar against the Swiss franc. So for this one on Friday, we're also trying to see whether we could have gotten some selling opportunities. And you can see the 3 regions right here that I had pointed out. So Friday morning price was here. I was expecting price to potentially come back in within this region. Unfortunately, guess this price was good enough for the sellers, and you can see that the market did push to the downside quite aggressively. There was a major fight that was going on within this region right here. So we did have the level right here, but we did adjust it slightly lower, just to incorporate what's going on within this region right here and potentially end up getting a proper perspective of where true SNR could be. So these are the 3 regions we will be watching out for today. So the top one is the aggressive conservative at the bottom, semi-aggressive conservative here. So what we could potentially find, and we hope, is the market does bounce off this region to the upside, still comes back in within this area. Maybe during the London session, we end up being on the pullback. Then during the US session, if we're back, at least back within this region, then maybe we could get some very, very good selling opportunity off this region to come to the downside. So watch out for that. But of course, remember that if that doesn't happen, then we'll definitely need to wait and see if we first can get a breach of this region to the downside. If that happens, then I guess the next best sell could be here. But in terms of looking for sales right now, it's a bit of a risk because we're more or less within a support region. You're also not too sure how the buyers within that particular region are going to react. So you're better off just waiting. So the next one, this is the US dollar against the Japanese yen. So for this one on Friday, we're also trying to see whether we could get some sells. So you can see the 3 regions right here that I had pointed out. So Friday morning price was here. We're expecting the pullback to come in. I guess the USDs were pretty weak, and that's the reason why they couldn't come back in within the regions we expected. Similar situation with what we've seen on the US dollar against the Swiss franc. So price unfortunately couldn't come back in within there. Seems like there was some sort of an SNR we did here. Price reacted, pushed to the downside. There were attempts of the market to hold to the downside, but you can't see that the sellers really struggled within this particular region before the buyers pushed the market back in. Same area that the market had actually moved during the London session. So for this one, we've adjusted the levels slightly. So these are the 3 areas we will be watching out for. So hopefully you can end up taking note of that. So this one is also similar to the US dollar against the Swiss franc. So we will be waiting to either see if we could potentially get the market lifting and coming back within here. And if you do look at the market structure, you can see that the market is somehow getting into some sort of a range, which means that the best selling opportunities are definitely at the top of the range, hopefully somewhere within there. If the pullback doesn't happen, then at least if we get a breach of structure and the sellers do break this area to the downside and we get a nice strong breach, to the downside and the pullback, then at least we could potentially try to see whether we could get some conservative selling opportunities within this region. So watch out for that. Also watch out for the region at the top. I know the USDs are pretty weak, but in case something happens and the market finds its way there and you get a good opportunity, the sales are still valid for as long as we're holding below the red SNR. So the next one, this is the euro against the US dollar. So for this one, on Friday, we're trying to see whether we could get some buying opportunities. So you can't see the 3 areas I had pointed out. So Friday morning price was here. We're expecting the pullback to come in here and potentially maybe get something we could read. But it just seems like the market just tapped within this region and took off to the upside quite aggressively during the London session. And then you can see that the pullbacks started to happen. But during the US session, it's like the big boys were just not interested. So for this one for today, these are the 3 areas we will be watching out for. So we've also adjusted the areas on this one, but of course, based on what the story of price is telling us. So these are the 3 areas we will be watching out for. Price is coming back in to come back, possibly to challenge this region here, but I'd possibly suggest and submit to you that you potentially don't end up starting to look for buying opportunities just yet. You can see that even if the level is somewhere here, within this region, you can see that the sellers have reacted. So you could hit a buy there and immediately you get taken out. So let's just hope this region reacts. If it does, because it has done that before, you can see that the market has been getting into some sort of a range within this region here. If it comes back in within here, I think the best buys are definitely somewhere within here. Alternatively, if we do break above this region to the upside and the pullback doesn't come in, back within the semi-aggressive conservative region, then at least you could look for the buys higher up, maybe somewhere within this area here. So watch out for that, but also watch out for the red SNR, remembering that for as long as we're holding above that red SNR, the buys are still valid. If we break and hold beneath it, then at that point in time, we'll have to fall back on the buying opportunities. So the next one, this is the New Zealand dollar against the US dollar. So for this one, on Friday, we were trying to see whether we could have gotten some buys. So you can see the 3 areas I had pointed out. So Friday morning price was here. It did something similar to the euro against the US dollar. You can see that the market just tapped back within this region, then took off to the upside quite aggressively. Fortunately, not much you could read here on the 15-minute time frame, maybe on a smaller time frame. We didn't get the slowdown. We would have wanted to see, in the build-up, the buyers really coming in before the market pushed to the upside. But at least we're expecting price to tap back in within here before moving up. That did happen. Price came up higher. You can see that this one broke to the upside, came back in, and more or less pretty much held, although there was a bit of a struggle before the market pushed to the upside. But the NZDs have been quite strong. And you can see that during the Asian session today, the market has actually started to push up even further. So these are the 3 areas we will be watching out for. So we will still be watching out for buys. But right now, not a good time to look for the buy. Wait for the pullback, at least back within this region. Or maybe if the market breaks to the upside, then potentially you could get some conservative buying opportunities. So hopefully you have taken note of that. And of course, remember to watch out for correlation. Just looking at the USDs, you can see most of them more or less doing the same thing. You can see that this one, the Australian dollar against the US dollar, seems similar to the New Zealand dollar against the US dollar. It's within a region of resistance. If it breaks above that, have a look at NZD USD as well to try to see what's going on, as well as Euro USD, USD Yen, USD CHF. Of course, with the inverse, if they're going to be breaking the levels beneath, to keep up with the sales. So watch out for this one. So these are the 3 areas we will be watching out for. Right now is not a good time to look for the buys. So say that the market breaks to the upside and we get a nice strong breach, get a sign that the big boys are back. The market pulls back in within here and still holds above. Maybe some fight that goes on within this region where you find some probes and some spikes to the downside. But generally, at least if the sellers are unable to break and hold beneath this region to the downside, then at least we could look for the buying opportunities. So watch out for that. And of course, also remember that during the London session, the market can pull back in. There's an SNR within here, which is also quite visible on the bigger time frame. So the market broke above this region to the upside. You can see that the market is making a sequence of higher highs and higher lows, seems to be trending to some extent. So there's a possibility that price could generally come back in within this region. If that happens, then this is also a very good area to get the buying opportunities. And I really hope price comes back in within there. I think the best buys are generally somewhere within there. So that's pretty much it in terms of the USDs. So we're going to move on to the Canadian dollar pairs now. And we're going to mix and match them up with everything on the buy side. So we'll start off with the Canadian dollar against the Swiss franc. So for this one, on Friday, we're trying to see whether we could get some selling opportunities. So these are the three areas I had pointed out. Friday morning price was here. We're expecting the pullback to come in at least somewhere within this region or as close as possible within there. Unfortunately, we couldn't get that happening. And you can see that the sellers came in, the buyers within here kept reacting. But you can't see that the sellers were potentially somewhere within this region because you can see that the market just kept coming back within this area right here. You can't see that even today during the Asian session, prices generally come back in within this area. You can see that that's where the sellers are really attempting to push to the downside. So for this one, the levels are the same. So nothing much has changed in terms of the story. So we will be watching out for the same regions that we had on Friday. So we will be waiting to see what happens. Hopefully, these buyers can actually react and push the price somewhere within here, because it seems that the sellers within here are actually not strong enough to actually break this region to the downside. So maybe the market might need to do or possibly end up going a bit higher, for a proper liquidity grab, just to make sure that can get in more orders so that the market can potentially break this region to the downside. So that's what we're anticipating. But also remember that price can also break beneath this region to the downside. If that happens and the sellers get strength out of nowhere, then at least we could potentially try see whether we could get some sales. But I'm betting maybe most potentially price will come back in within this region. And we really hope that that does end up happening. So also watch out for the region at the top. It's also a possibility price can find its way back there. If the big boys need it, then who are we to disagree? We'll just have to play with it. So if price finds its way back there, then at least also be ready for sales as well. So the next one, this is the Canadian dollar against the Japanese yen. So for this one, on Friday, we're trying to see whether we could get some sales. Can't see what the game plan was. So Friday morning, price was here. London session, you can't see that the market did come down. Unfortunately, couldn't come down all the way till within here. It seems that there was some sort of an SNR within here that was giving issues. And you can see that the market was pushed back up within this region. Sellers really struggled within this area, but you can see that the market did actually end up going up a bit much further to the upside. So for this one, these are the three areas we will be watching out for today. So unfortunately, the sales on Friday did not really work as we would have expected. Of course, we wanted to see lower lows and lower highs. So let's hope we get that happening today. So these are the three areas we will be watching out for. So aggressive, conservative, semi-aggressive, conservative here. Generally, remember that there's a region somewhere here. I think I can point that out. So on your way down, even as you're targeting down here, just make sure that you watch out for this area. I mean, it's given issues before. You can't just overlook the fact that the buyers are sitting within that region. But at least if we get the market tapping back within here, and hopefully in a very choppy manner, if we get a struggle there, then at least I think we could get these sellers who already started showing up, during the Asian session, potentially coming back, maybe during the London session, or maybe during the US session. So just watch out for that. But also remember, price can also bounce off this region to the upside. You can see that buyers within here have reacted before. You can see that they've pushed the market up. We just need to see what are they going to do on their next push. And that's the reason why I've illustrated this, because we want to see what these buyers can do. They generally struggle coming back up within here. If you do attempt sales, even if you put your stops there, targeting down here or maybe lower, it's okay. You just need to make sure that you manage and watch out for these two regions right here on your way down. So watch out for that. Also watch out for the region at the top, red SNR. It's a bit of a long shot, but remember, price can also find its way there. And if it does, then at least you also still should be ready for that as well. So the next one, this is the euro against the Canadian dollar. So for this one on Friday, we're trying to see whether we could get some buying opportunities. These are the three areas I had pointed out. So Friday morning price was here. You can see that during the London session, price just took off to the upside, but it's not something that was unexpected per se. It's just that it happened quite fast, not something that we could read. But also remember, like we keep on pointing out the times, 10, which is the London market open, 3, which is the New York session open, and 4:30. Which is the New York Stock Exchange open. And of course, when I'm talking about those times, I'm talking about the Kenyan time. So at least within those times, you find the market within these strategic levels. There's a high probability that the market could be pushing itself off these regions. So you can see that at 10, which was during the London market open, price was here, it went up, came down, and you can see that price was back in within a support region at 3, and it did push itself off this region to the upside once again. So there is a high probability, the fact that we're high up within here and the London market open is about to happen. So if price is around here at 10, it wouldn't be a surprise to see price come back in to the downside. And hopefully if it's back within here at around 3, then at least maybe you could find the buy happening. And in any case, if you look at the market structure, we're in some sort of a range. So the best buying opportunities are definitely down within here. So it's just a matter of patience. And you could find that during the US session, from around 3, 4:30, price could be back within here and we could push to the upside. Alternatively, if the market breaks above this area to the upside, comes back in, although you'll really need to watch out because you can't see that there's been a massive probe here, which tells us that there are definitely sellers generally within this region right here. So unless the price breaks above this region to the upside quite aggressively, and we get the sellers really struggling to push the market back down, then at least at that point in time, we could potentially say that the buying opportunities within here could be valid. And of course, once we get that breach of structure, and we're out of the range. So watch out for that. But there's a high probability we could be coming back to the bottom of the range. If that happens, I can bet you the best buys are definitely going to be within that region there. So watch out for that. So the next one, this is the New Zealand dollar against the Canadian dollar. So for this one on Friday, we're trying to see whether we could get some buys. So these are the three areas I had pointed out. So Friday morning price was here. We're expecting maybe the market to dip down, come back in, hold, and potentially get some buys. You can see that the market really tested this region a number of times before the market took off to the upside. And this was much, much later on. So you can see that the buyers kept pushing and at least pushing price and maintaining it above here. Then eventually price did start to push to the upside, but in a very, very choppy manner. So for this one for today, these are the three areas we will be keeping our eyes locked on. So we'll be trying to see whether we could get some buying opportunities within these three areas and also areas where we can manage our trades. So right now the market seems to be attempting to break above this region to the upside. So we'll be waiting to see what happens. If price comes back in within here during the London session, maybe we could get the buys pushing to the upside. Although this breach doesn't seem too convincing, especially considering the fact that the price is just sitting, just above this SNR. Most times when that happens, it tends to be some sort of a trap. So you'll find that many guys will actually get fooled thinking that the support region is actually holding and they start hitting the buys there, of course, putting their stops within these regions here, only for the market to actually come back in to the downside, maybe tap back in within here, or maybe even all the way down here before the market actually takes off to the upside. So at least if we do get the market coming back or attempting to come down, maybe even coming as close as possible within here, but the buyer still push to the upside, at least if you do attempt your buys after that, you might be safer after the probe as opposed to taking the trade before the probe. So watch out for that. Also watch out for this region at the bottom. It's a bit of a long shot, but like we always say, it doesn't really hurt to have it there, So it's better to have something and not need it rather than need something and not have it. So at least when price comes back in within there, if it does find its way there, and in any case, when uncertain times, Trump could say something, in as much as we've looked at the economic calendar and there isn't much, Trump could easily say something and you could find the markets just moving and you could easily find price there. So just keep it there. It doesn't really hurt. So last but not least, for the Canadian dollar pairs, the Australian dollar against the Canadian dollar. So this is a new entrant on our watch list, and we will be trying to see whether we could get some buying opportunities. So these are the three areas that we're going to be watching out for. So this one is attempting to break to the upside. This is not yet a breach. Remember that when we're doing our trading, and of course this goes out to newbies, we never really do our analysis based on live candles. So this candle right now is irrelevant to us. It's an active candle. We first need to see the market close above. That candle hasn't closed. And even if it does close above, we always need to see the breach and the hold. So potentially we even get the market moving up a bit higher, even on the next sequence of candles that are going to be coming in, and we get the pullback coming in, then at least we could maybe end up looking for some buying opportunities. Remember that when we're looking at the story of price, it's not based on one candle, it's a sequence of candles put together. So we do need that push to go up higher, come back in. At least that will give us more room to even target to the upside, because if it just breaks and holds above here, like we've seen on the New Zealand dollar against the Canadian dollar, if you do look for buys, you might not have sufficient room to move to the upside. But at least if the market even goes up higher, comes back in within here, you could generally end up targeting the high that the market actually gets up to. So at least you'll have more range, as opposed to if the market just breaks and sits. Could be a bit of a tricky situation. So watch out for that. Also watch out for these two regions right here. A bit of a long shot, but it's very possible, the London big boys could do the pullback, then the US big boys could actually push the market to the upside, and you could find those proper buying opportunities happening during the US session. So that's pretty much it in terms of the Canadian dollar pairs. So right now we're going to move on to the last set of currency pairs, which are the GBPs. So we're going to start off with the Great British Pound against the Swiss franc. So for this one on Friday, we're trying to see whether we could get some selling opportunities. You can't see the three regions I had pointed out. So Friday morning price was here. We're expecting the sales to come in, but at least potentially getting the market tapping back within here. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. You can see that the market was here during the London market open. The price just came down quite aggressively off this region. I guess the prices within here are good enough for the sellers. Then the market reacted, attempted to come up higher, but consider there was some sort of a probe. In fact, if I put an SNR within here, you will see that the sellers were really reacting off this area to the downside. So they were just coming shy of that. You can even see today during the Asian session, price gapped, tapped within that region, but the sellers are still holding. But there's still a high probability that price will be coming back in within this region here, because you can't even see that right now, price is more or less just holding just beneath that SNR that I've just put in right here. So this could be some sort of a trap, but I'm really hoping and anticipating that price will come back in within this region. If it does, I think the best selling opportunities still do remain to be here, because this was a major SNR when the market broke to the downside. And I'm guessing the reason why the market is stuck within here is potentially because it does need the prices within this particular region here. So watch out for that. Also watch out for the region at the top right here. Potentially, if the pullback comes in deeper, then at least we'll still be watching out for that region at the top. So the next one, this is the Great British Pound against the Japanese yen. So for this one, on Friday, we're trying to see whether we could get sells. You can't see the three areas I had pointed out. So Friday morning price was here. We're expecting the pullback to come in within this region here. Price turned off this area right here, came to the downside, but you can see that the market bounced off this region, came up in a very choppy manner. And unfortunately, the sell we did want to see on Friday seems to have happened during the Asian session today. So we will be waiting to see whether we could get price coming back. At least you can't see that in as much as price came to the downside, at least it seems to have bounced off this region where we do have buyers within here. It's coming back in. At least the buyers are now starting to run out of steam. But at least if the market could potentially be pushed back within this region, I think we could get some very, very good selling opportunities somewhere within this area right here. So watch out for that. But this is a good sign in terms of the big sellers showing up, the struggle of the buyers coming up. potentially if we get price coming back as close as possible within this region, I think we could get some very good sales. So watch out for that. But remember that on your way down, you will need to manage your trade within this region, even if you could be targeting lower. And of course, for the guys who are really good at trading, you could even end up scaling in at the semi-aggressive conservative region, which is that mid scenario that you have there. So the next one, this is the euro against the Great British Pound. So for this one, on Friday, we're trying to see whether we could get some buying opportunities. So these are the three areas I had pointed out. So you can see also an illustration of what to expect. Unfortunately, we just couldn't get the market moving somewhere as close as possible within here. And you can see that today during the Asian session, it came just so close within this area right here, but you still can't see that the market is still struggling. So let's hope the London big boys will potentially end up making a move on this one, but it's either the market will end up breaking this region to the upside. If it does on the pullback, we get a nice slow pullback coming back in within this region, we could get some buying opportunities at that point in time. If that doesn't happen, then hopefully if we get the pullback coming back in within here, maybe we could find price lifting off this region to the upside. So those are the two options we're going to be watching out for. But generally, where price is, it's so close within that region at the top. So in terms of looking for the buys, the risk to reward is not on your side. So you're better off potentially not looking for buys just yet, unless we break above that SNR to the upside, the conservative region. So the next one, this is the Great British Pound against the New Zealand dollar. So for this one on Friday, we're trying to see whether we could get some selling opportunities. So you can see the three areas that I had pointed out, also an illustration of what to expect. So Friday morning price was here. We're expecting maybe some spikes and things like that happening within this region. You can see that there was a real fight that was going on with the buyers really knocking on this area right here, but the sellers really maintained their ground. And you can see that eventually during the US session, you can see that from 3, price came up, tapped within that, 3 price was back within there. And you can see that the sellers did actually make a push to the downside, and the market came down, at least tapping back within this region, but the buyers were still able to push the market to the upside. But that's because price came back in within a support region at 430. So at 3, it was within a seller's region, 430 it was back within a buyer's region, and you can see that the market pushed to the upside quite aggressively. And that's the reason why we keep on pointing out that money management is very key. You can imagine someone who got the sales high up there, and when price is back within this or down within this region, you're excited and you forget to manage your trade. Within a couple of minutes, you're taken back all the way to square one. And that's the nature of trading. That's why you always need to be on your toes in terms of money management. But this one, at least one good sell, but also you can't see that much later on the market did actually end up coming down much, much lower. So for today, these are the 3 areas we will be watching out for. In terms of looking for selling opportunities, might not be the best idea just yet. So let's either wait and see if we could breach beneath this region to the downside. If that happens, then at least we could keep up with the sales. But generally, you can see that the sellers have attempted to break beneath here before and they haven't been successful. So you really need to be careful within this particular region right here. Alternatively, the market bounces off this area to the upside. If we could get price coming in somewhere as close as possible within here, although it might be a bit of a long shot, but at least if we could get price pushing up off this region, even if it doesn't come back in within here, there's also an SNR, maybe somewhere within here, a minor one that maybe price could, potentially end up coming back until. So at least generally we get sales further away from this region and close or as close as possible within here, but if not within here, the better for us. So let's wait and see what happens. Also watch out for the region at the top. It's a bit of a long shot, but you never know what might just happen. In any case, you know that the big sellers who are in control of the market are sitting somewhere within that region. So everything that's happening right now is more or less within their playground. So you still could find price pushing up. The buyers might think they're having their way, only for price to end up going all the way to within that region. I mean, for those of you that understand supply and demand, then you generally know what I'm talking about. Where the pushes started working off from, you could easily find price going back to within those areas. See, like, for example, for this one, there's a supply region high up there. price could easily end up pulling back all the way till within this region, but we generally know that the big sellers who started this push coming down are sitting within here. So even if price pulls back in within here, generally we're still going to be looking for sales. If it breaks and holds above here to the upside, then at that point in time we'll have to fall back on our selling opportunities. So watch out for these three areas on this one. This is the Great British Pound against the Australian dollar. So we'll be hoping to get the market pushing back within this region here. We have some region of supply within here. You can see that there's a minor supply. Sellers have reacted off here before to some extent. In fact, if I do zoom out, you will see that the market seems to be in some sort of a range. So this is an outlier up here. But generally, you can see that we're in some sort of a range if you have to ignore this part. So you could easily find price coming back within here, and definitely you could find some very good sales happening off this region to the downside. Alternatively, if we get a breach of structure of this range and the market actually breaks to the downside of this area, then potentially on the pullback, we could get some very good conservative selling opportunities. So do watch out for that. Those are the two options we will be watching out for. So I guess that's pretty much it in terms of the currency pairs. So hopefully you can end up taking note of them for the guys who missed out on that. So we're going to be looking at the indices and the commodities now, and they're all on the buy side of things. So we'll start off with the NAS 100. So for this one on Friday, we're trying to see whether we could get some buying opportunities. You can see the three regions that I had pointed out. So for as long as we're holding above here, the bias is to look for buying opportunities. So price came back in within here. So Friday morning price was here, came back in within here, tapped within here. The buyers attempted to lift up, they couldn't. Price came back again, back within this region. You can see that the buyers really struggled to push to the upside. And they've really struggled, really struggled. You can even see that during the Asian session, it's just moving, very, very slowly. But let's see what happens. And of course, if you're going to be looking for buyers right now, that might not be such a good idea. So just wait and see if either we could get price breaking above here to the upside. So in as much as the sellers, the buyers look like they're coming in quite slowly, they could easily end up picking up some steam, because sometimes that ends up happening. So they're just slowly stocking into this area. Then if we get them, getting a big push to the upside and actually taking out this region on the pullback, at least if you look for buys after that, you should be good to go. But hopefully we can also get some pullback coming in. Maybe the pullback might not come in all the way till within this region here. Of course, we hope it does. But there are quite a number of scenarios that the market could come back until. See, like, for example, when the market broke above this region right here to the upside. So above this region to the upside, you can see that when the market did that, it didn't actually pull back within this region. So there's a possibility we could get some sort of a retest, maybe closing this minor gap that the market did actually form. So if that happens, and at least we get the sellers flowing down and the buyers coming in, even if price doesn't come back in within here, this price is good enough in terms of looking for the buys if that ends up happening. And in any case, if you look at the risk to reward going up, this is at least sufficient room to move to the upside, as opposed to trying to squeeze yourself in within this particular region right here. So make sure that you do watch out for that. But generally, the bias is to try to see whether we could get buying opportunities for as long as we're holding above the red SNR to the upside. So the next one, this is the US 30 or the Dow Jones. So for this one, similar situation to the NAS 100. We're trying to watch out and see whether we could get some buys. You can see Friday morning price was here. I pointed out that we could get, or we're hoping we could just get price coming back within this region here. And price did come back in within here. And you can see that the buyers started to show up, but they did fully show up. They really struggled. It was until much later on that the market did start to push to the upside. And you can see that this one is almost somehow similar to the NAS 100. So let's see what happens. But it seems that the markets are recovering from Trump's mess last week with the whole issue of the tariffs and stuff. So at least now the markets are starting to become bullish once again. So these are the three areas we'll be watching out for. Let's see what happens. Also for this one, similar situation. At least if the market breaks above here to the upside and we get a nice strong breach, pullback comes back in within here, then at least you could look for the buys. But also you could find that within these areas, you can't even see that there's a bunch of sellers who are sitting within here. You're not quite sure how the sellers within here could react. So if the market pulls back within this region here, and it's very possible, for price to come back in within the semi-aggressive conservative region, it's very possible for price to take off from within that area. But even if it doesn't, I think there's a possibility we could get price coming back within this region again. You can see that there was a small, or there was a quick spike that came back in within here, and you can see that there was some sort of a reaction. It's very possible for price at least to come back in within here. And I think if that does happen, I think some very good buys might potentially end up hiding somewhere within here, even if price doesn't come back in within this particular region. So watch out for that. Remember, the bias is to look for buys. If you do get sells, you can take them, but be very careful with the sells, because the sells are counters. So you could easily end up getting stopped out, because generally the buyers are in control. So the next one, this is silver. So for silver, even before we look at today, on Friday, we're in a bit of a catch-22 situation. So price was here. I pointed out that it was either one of two things. If the price was going to go up, come down, and actually hold to the downside of this region, we could have actually looked for the sells. But if it broke to the upside, came back in, and actually held above this region to the upside, and on the pullback actually still held above here, then at that point in time, we would have started to look for buying opportunities. So you can see that all through the London session, the price was just fooling around within this particular region. It went up higher, broke above that region, came back in, and actually held above this region to the upside. And you can see that after that, price started to move up higher. So at that point in time, we officially entered what we call a buyer's zone. So for this one, for today, these are the three areas we will be watching out for. So we'll be watching out for buys of these three areas right here, and also areas where we will be watching out to manage our trades. So this is what the game plan is going to be looking like. You can see that price has already tapped back in within this region. The bars have already started reacting, which is good. But we'll be hopefully waiting to see if we could get a slight pullback coming in, maybe somewhere as close as possible within here, because we generally want to get the prices, as close as possible within areas of demand or areas of support, so that at least the risk to reward also ends up being a bit much better. So let us hope that happens. If that ends up being the case, I think we could get some very good buying opportunities within here. But generally, you can see that the buyers are now starting to pick up and build momentum, which is very, very good. But there's a minor sellers region within here. If this region could just react and get that minor pullback coming in, I think even generally somewhere within this region, even if we don't get price coming back in within this area, at least somewhere within this area could be much better. At least even if your stops are here, the risk to reward going up will definitely be worth it. So watch out for that. Also watch out for the red SNR at the bottom. The buyers who started this push going up are sitting within here. So we have a major support and a major demand area within there. Price can still come back in within that region, and it's very possible you could find price pushing to the upside of that particular region. So last but not least, we do have gold. So for gold, even before we look at today, just a quick recap of what happened on Friday. We're trying to see whether we could get buys. So you can see the three areas I had pointed out. So Friday morning price was here. The sellers are just coming quite aggressively. We're expecting maybe on the next push to come back in. That's what we're anticipating, to get the buys happening off here. Unfortunately, the pullback just couldn't get all the way to within here. So it's like the sellers showed up and then disappeared immediately after that. And you can see that the market did continue to push up higher, broke above this region to the upside. I had pointed out that if that ended up being the case, then potentially you could also end up getting buys within this particular region. So price went up, broke to the upside quite strong, came back in. You can see that the market came back in within here, but technically there was a fight that was going on. But generally, the buyers within this region have been able to sustain price to the upside. So for this one, gold is making new highs. So it made a new high on Friday, which is somewhere within this particular region. So we'll be anticipating to see it continuing to make new highs, maybe today and of course this week. So watch out for these three areas right here. We're in some sort of a range right now. So that tells you that the best buying opportunities are generally within this particular area right here. You don't want to be getting your buys in the middle of a range. Try and get them at least as close as possible within here so that at least you have more room to the upside. Because if I put a line somewhere within here, which seems like the midpoint of this range, you want to be getting your buys on the bottom half of the range, not on the top half. If you get them on the top half, then your risk to reward is going to be skewed. So watch out for that. At least if you get the buys down here, definitely make sure you watch out for this particular region being the high. And at least if the market breaks above this region to the upside, and let's say the buyers keep up the momentum, we don't know how far we'll end up going. Remember that right now, gold, we're just moving step by step, as it's making new levels, as it's moving higher and higher. So the only area that we know right now is this one. If we break above here, then we don't know where we are heading. So you really need to be very careful in terms of your money management. But at least if the market goes up higher, pulls back in within this region, you could get the buys. I mean, similar situation with what happened here. Price went up, made this high right here, came back in. Anyone who got the buys down here, them targeting high up within here, they're not wrong, because you can see that the market has even reacted off there. So similar situation, and that's how we'll be trading as we're continuing to make new highs as the market continues to breach new levels and make history. So I guess that's pretty much it in terms of everything. So hopefully you've taken note of that and everything we've discussed. So just a quick look at the chat box. So I see Lyle there. Good to see you here, Lyle. You're saying commodities could push higher, considering a majority of bondholders are covering their positions using them, gold, silver, and copper. So 3,500 viable for gold this month, as it tends to peak in April. Yeah, that's true. In any case, you can't see that gold has started to pick momentum, and also the indices and everything have also started to pick up higher. In any case, gold is also a safe haven. So, when things are uncertain, many people jump onto gold. Gold has also been going up for a major part. I mean, since the beginning of this year, it's just been going up, up, up. So definitely 3,500, it's in the foreseeable side. I do agree. I think it's something that we're going to be hitting. And personally, I'm really looking forward to seeing gold hit 4,000 sometime this year. So let's see what happens with everything that's going on, even with Trump's drama that's going on. And I'm sure it's just the beginning. I mean, the guy's only been in power for about 3 months now. So he still has about another 3 years and something to go. And rumor has it that he's also trying to see whether he could potentially end up getting a third term, because according to the American Constitution, a president is not allowed to run for more than 2 consecutive terms. So there's an argument that his term, the first time, then there was the breach that came in with Biden, then now he's back. So they're trying to see if they could actually end up having him have a second term, to have 2 consecutive terms. So if that ends up being the case, I think it's going to be an interesting 8 years. So this is just the beginning, but let's see what ends up happening. So thank you so much for that, Lyle. So I want to thank everyone so much for making the time to be here with us. We're always happy to see you here. And of course, we do hope that you do end up achieving a lot in terms of your trading. It's going to be a short week this week, considering we do have the Easter break happening. So we'll see how things end up going, but that doesn't mean that opportunities are not going to be there. So I see, Lali, you're saying 4,000, probably Q4. I expect retracements in Q3. Yeah, that's okay. I'm also expecting maybe Q4. Maybe that's when at least we could end up seeing 4,000. It's very possible, because gold has been picking up momentum, going through the thousands. The first, I think from 0 to 1,000, it took so long to get there, over 100 years. Then from 1,000 to 2,000, I think it took about 15 years. 2,000 to 3,000 took about 2 years or so. So I'm expecting 3,000 to 4,000 will even end up taking a much shorter time. So there's that picking up of the momentum, and hopefully Q4, maybe we could see 4,000. All right, so I guess we'll see you guys tomorrow. If you do get any trades, make sure that you do send them in to us, whether good or bad. Our contact details are there. And of course, for more insights more information, feel free to reach out to us, but also feel free to visit www.afriforex.com. Also, remember to like and subscribe. It does end up helping out our channel. So with that, happy trading, guys. But for now, may the peeps be with you. God bless.